Okay, so you want a parrot, and the fantasy is genuinely one of the best in the entire pet world. A brilliantly colored bird riding on your shoulder, an animal that looks you in the eye with something that is unmistakably intelligence behind it. A creature that actually talks back, that learns your name, that says hello when you walk in the door, and means it. Nothing else in the pet world does that, not one thing. Here's the problem. Almost everything written about the cost of a parrot quietly assumes you'll be there for the whole thing. And with a parrot, that is very often not true. Because here is the fact that reframes this entire video before we spend a single dollar. A large parrot can live 50, 60, 80 years. An African gray commonly reaches 40 to 60. A macaw can pass 80, which means a parrot is not a pet you buy. A parrot is a pet you must write into your will. It is the only common companion animal where the responsible thing to do, on day one, is plan for who takes care of it after you are dead. You are not adopting an animal, you are becoming one chapter in an animal's life, and there will probably be chapters after yours. So let's actually do it. Let's price a parrot properly. From the day it comes home to the day, potentially half a century from now, someone else takes over. And we're going to keep a running total on screen the entire time, because this number goes somewhere no other pet in this series has gone. Let's start at 0. And we have to start with the word itself, because parrot is close to meaningless as a financial category. It covers a range so enormous that two animals both correctly called parrots can differ by a factor of 1,000 in cost and by 70 years in lifespan. At the bottom, you have budgies, also called parakeets, at $20 to $50, and cockatiels, at $100 to $250. These are small parrots. They live roughly 8 to 25 years. They fit in a modest cage, and they are, genuinely, a reasonable pet for a normal person. Keep that in mind, because almost everything alarming in this video applies to the big ones. In the middle, conures at $400 to $800, and a whole tier of medium parrots that live 25 to 40 years. Then the large parrots, and this is where both the price and the commitment change character entirely. An African gray, widely considered one of the most intelligent animals on the planet, runs $1,500 to $3,500, an Amazon, $1,000 to $3,000, a cockatoo, $1,500 to $4,000, a macaw, $2,000 to $5,000, and for a hyacinth macaw, the largest flying parrot in the world, prices run well past $10,000 and into the tens of thousands. And then there's the category that should make you stop and think, exactly like the free horse did. Rescue and rehome parrots, often available for a fraction of those prices, sometimes free. Parrot rescues and sanctuaries across the world are chronically, desperately full. And the reason is not that people are cruel. The reason is that a bird outlived a marriage, or a house move, or a job change, or an owner's patience, or an owner's life. A cheap parrot is not a bargain. Cheap parrot is very often an animal that has already been failed once by someone who did not run these numbers before they started. And there's one more thing worth knowing before you buy anything, because it shapes the whole market. Many parrot species are threatened or endangered in the wild, and the international trade in wild-caught birds did enormous damage to wild populations for decades. That trade is now heavily restricted by international agreement, and importing wild-caught parrots is banned or tightly controlled across most of the world. The practical result is that essentially every pet parrot you can legitimately buy today should be captive bred, and a reputable seller will be able to tell you exactly where the bird came from. If anyone is vague about a bird's origin, that is a genuine red flag, legally and ethically. It also means the bird in front of you is, at most, a few generations from wild, which becomes extremely important later in this video. Let's be reasonable and pick the middle of the serious end. Let's say you buy a young African gray for $2,500. Add it to the total, $2,500. And now comes the first genuine shock. Because unlike a dog or a cat, a parrot's housing is not an accessory. It is infrastructure, and it is expensive. You need a cage, and not the kind you're picturing from a pet store aisle. A proper cage for a large parrot needs to be big enough for the bird to fully spread and flap its wings without touching the sides, which for an African gray means minimum dimensions most people find genuinely surprising, and for a macaw means something closer to a piece of furniture than a cage. It needs correct bar spacing, because bars too wide let a bird get its head stuck, and bars too narrow prevent climbing. And critically, it needs to be made of the right material. This part matters more than almost anything else you'll buy. Parrots chew everything, constantly, including their cage. Cheap cages are often galvanized or coated with materials containing zinc or lead, and heavy metal poisoning from chewing on a cheap cage is a well-documented, genuinely lethal problem in pet birds. So you need stainless steel or a properly powder-coated bird-safe cage, and those run $500 to $2,000 and up. A large stainless steel macaw cage can cost more than a good used car's worth of furniture. On top of the cage, you need a play stand, so the bird has somewhere to be outside the cage. You need perches of varied diameters and textures, because a bird standing on identical smooth dowels, its whole life develops foot problems. You need food and water dishes, a travel carrier for vet trips, and full-spectrum lighting in many setups, because birds need appropriate light cycles for hormonal and psychological health. Realistically, the full setup for a large parrot runs $800 to $2,500. Let's say $1,500. Add it to the total. We're now at $4,000, and the bird has been home for one day. Now let's talk about the recurring costs, and the first one is genuinely unlike anything else in this series: toys. For a dog, toys are optional enrichment. For a parrot, toys are a medical necessity, and I want to be precise about why. In the wild, a parrot spends somewhere between 4 and 8 hours a day foraging, manipulating objects, tearing things apart, and solving problems to get food. That is not a hobby, that is the animal's primary occupation. A parrot in a cage with nothing to destroy is not a relaxed parrot. It is an intelligent animal with 6 unoccupied hours and nothing to do with them. And the consequences of that show up later in this video in a very expensive way. So you buy toys. And here's the part that catches everyone. The toys are designed to be destroyed, and the bird destroys them, and that means it worked. You are not buying a possession. You are buying a consumable. A large parrot can shred a well-made wooden foraging toy in a matter of days. Realistically, toys and foraging materials for a large parrot run $30 to $100 a month, and many owners spend more. Call it $600 a year, every year, for decades, spent entirely on objects whose sole purpose is to be obliterated. And if you stop buying them to save money, the bird does not simply sit quietly. It finds something else to destroy. Your window frames, your kitchen cabinets, your furniture, or, worst of all, and we'll get to this, itself, then food. And parrot food is not bird seed. This is one of the most common and most damaging misconceptions in bird keeping. A seed-only diet is nutritionally poor and is strongly associated with obesity, fatty liver disease, and shortened lifespan in parrots. A proper diet means a quality formulated pellet as a base, plus a genuinely significant amount of fresh vegetables, some fruit, and appropriate extras, prepared regularly. You are, in effect, doing a small amount of daily food prep for a bird, forever. Between pellets and fresh produce, a large parrot runs $40 to $100 a month. Call it $700 a year. Then the vet. And here the parrot introduces a problem that no dog or cat owner ever has to think about. Avian medicine is a specialty. Not every veterinarian can competently treat a parrot, and many will tell you so honestly and refer you elsewhere. Certified or genuinely experienced avian vets are unevenly distributed, and in large parts of the world, the nearest one is not around the corner, it's a drive. Some owners routinely travel 1, 2, 3 hours each way for a routine appointment. Before you get a parrot, the genuinely correct first step is to find out whether an avian vet exists within a distance you can reach in an emergency. Because if the answer is no, everything else in this video is academic. And avian care costs more than standard small animal care. A routine wellness exam with basic blood work for a large parrot commonly runs $150 to $400, and specialist emergency care climbs into the many hundreds or thousands quickly. Which brings us to the thing parrots do that makes all of this worse. Parrots hide illness even more completely than cats do. We talked about this with cats, but with birds it is more extreme, because a parrot is a prey animal and a flock animal simultaneously. A visibly weak bird in a wild flock attracts predators to the entire group, so evolution selected hard for birds that conceal weakness. Parrot can be seriously, dangerously ill and still sit on its perch looking bright, alert, and completely normal. Experienced avian vets will tell you plainly that by the time a parrot is visibly sick, sitting fluffed at the bottom of the cage, it is often an emergency and has been unwell for a considerable time already. So stack up a normal year, food at around $700, toys at around $600, routine vet care, and the fund you should be keeping for the fact that the first visible symptom may already be a crisis. Add cage maintenance, replacement perches and dishes, cleaning supplies, and the electricity for lighting. A realistic annual cost for a large parrot, in a normal year where nothing goes badly wrong, lands somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000. Let's use $2,000. Let's put your first full year in at $2,000. Add it to the total. We are now at $6,000, and your parrot is 1 year old. Now here's the counterintuitive engine at the center of parrot economics, and it is completely different from anything we've covered with dogs, cats, or horses. Dogs have been domesticated for something on the order of 30,000 years. Cats, roughly 10,000. Both species have been shaped, over an enormous span of time, to live alongside humans. Parrots have not. Parrots are not domesticated animals. They are wild animals that happen to be captive bred, and in many cases the bird in your living room is only a handful of generations removed from a wild population. Nothing about a parrot's brain has been redesigned for life in a house. Every instinct it has is still calibrated for a tropical forest and a flock of dozens of other parrots. And that means its needs are not pet needs, they are wild animal needs. A wild parrot spends nearly all its waking time within sight and sound of its flock. It forages for hours, it flies real distances, it solves problems constantly. It is, cognitively, roughly comparable to a young child, with the emotional volatility to match. Now put that animal alone in a cage in a quiet house while you work an 8-hour day, 5 days a week, for 40 years. This is the actual cost of a parrot, and it isn't money. It is time, and it is the one thing in this entire video you cannot buy your way out of. A large parrot genuinely needs hours of interaction and out-of-cage time every single day, and it needs it for its entire multi-decade life, not just during the exciting first year. And it's worth making that concrete, because hours a day is easy to nod along to and hard to actually picture. A real day with a large parrot looks something like this. The bird wakes early, with the light, and it is loud. Because dawn is when a wild flock calls to each other, and that instinct did not disappear because you'd like to sleep in. It needs fresh food prepared, not scooped, because a significant part of its diet is produce that has to be washed and chopped. Its cage needs cleaning, and parrots are genuinely messy in a way that surprises people, flinging food and producing dust. It needs several hours out of the cage, supervised, because an unsupervised parrot loose in a house will find the one electrical cord or toxic houseplant you forgot about. It needs actual interaction during that time, not just proximity, because a bored parrot in the same room as a person on a laptop is still a bored parrot. And in the evening, it needs a genuine, consistent dark sleep period of 10 to 12 hours, which means your living room schedule now partly belongs to a bird. Do that every day. Then do it on the days you're sick, exhausted, heartbroken, or busy. Then do it for 40 more years. That's the real price tag, and no line on a spreadsheet captures it. And when it doesn't get that, the consequences are predictable, well-documented, and expensive. The first is screaming. All parrots vocalize, and that's normal and healthy. But a bored, lonely, or frustrated parrot escalates. Macaw's call can reach volumes comparable to standing near heavy machinery, and it is physically impossible to soundproof away. This is not a minor annoyance. Screaming is one of the leading reasons parrots are surrendered, and it is a genuine cause of neighbor complaints, lease violations, and in real cases, people being forced to choose between their bird and their home. The second is biting. A large parrot's beak is a tool evolved to crack extremely hard nuts. A frightened, hormonal, or badly handled large parrot can inflict a serious injury, and this is a very real safety consideration in a house with children. And the third is the one that genuinely breaks owners' hearts: feather-destructive behavior, plucking. A parrot that is chronically understimulated, stressed, or in some cases medically unwell may begin pulling out its own feathers, sometimes to the point of self-mutilation. It is one of the most common presenting complaints in avian practice, and the workup is expensive because a responsible vet must rule out a long list of medical causes before concluding it's behavioral. That means blood work, imaging, sometimes biopsies, easily running many hundreds to a few $1,000s, and even then, the honest answer is often that the underlying cause is that the animal's psychological needs aren't being met, which no amount of money fixes directly. You can hire help. Avian behavioral consultants exist and are genuinely valuable, running perhaps $100 to $300 per session. But what they will tell you, in almost every case, is that the bird needs more time, more foraging, more social contact, and more space. They are selling you a plan. You still have to live it, every day, for decades. So let's get to the multiplier, because this is where a parrot leaves every other pet in this series behind. An African gray can live 40 to 60 years. Let's use 50, which is entirely ordinary for a well-cared-for bird. You've paid for year 1. Run the remaining 49 years at $2,000 a year. That's $98,000. Add it to the total. We have now crossed $100,000. Read that number again, $100,000 for a bird. And that's the conservative version, on a middle-priced parrot, in a scenario where nothing goes seriously wrong. Let's add the realistic medical and behavioral reality, one significant illness workup, and some behavioral intervention across 50 years, at $6,000. Add it to the total. We are now at roughly $110,000. Now, in every other video in this series, this is the point where we talk about insurance as the tool that softens the worst of it. With a parrot, that section works differently, and the difference matters. Pet insurance for dogs and cats is a mature, competitive, easy-to-buy product. Insurance for birds is not. Exotic pet coverage exists, but the market is dramatically smaller. The number of insurers willing to write avian policies is limited. Coverage is often narrower, and in many regions it is difficult or impossible to find a policy for a large parrot at all. Plenty of experienced bird owners have simply never been offered a realistic option, which means the fallback that dog and cat owners treat as optional, building your own emergency fund, is not optional with a parrot. It is the primary plan. And it has to be a real fund, because avian emergency medicine is expensive, specialist care may be a long drive away, and, as we covered, the first visible symptom is frequently already a crisis rather than a warning. So the honest advice for a parrot is blunter than for any other animal here. Before you buy the bird, have money set aside specifically for its medical care, because you very likely cannot outsource that risk to an insurer the way you could with a dog. The big bill is still not a maybe, it's a when. You just have fewer tools to absorb it, and a longer window for it to arrive in. And now there's a second layer of cost with a parrot that has nothing to do with the bird's own upkeep and everything to do with the fact that you are keeping a wild tropical animal inside a human house. Start with the one that genuinely surprises people, because it can require you to re-equip your kitchen. Birds have extraordinarily efficient respiratory systems, which makes them exquisitely vulnerable to airborne toxins. Non-stick cookware, when overheated, can release fumes that are rapidly fatal to birds. This is not a myth or an internet exaggeration. It is a well-established hazard that avian vets warn about constantly, and it has killed a great many pet birds. Responsible parrot owners frequently replace their non-stick cookware entirely with stainless steel or cast iron. Add to that aerosol sprays, scented candles, air fresheners, certain cleaning products, and cigarette smoke, all of which range from risky to lethal in a home with a bird. Owning a parrot genuinely changes how you run your household, and some of those changes cost real money up front. Then housing. Many landlords who happily allow a cat will not allow a large parrot, specifically because of noise, and finding a rental that accepts one meaningfully narrows your options, sometimes at higher rent. If you own, you still have neighbors, and a macaw at full volume through a shared wall is a genuine problem. A number of parrot rehomings trace directly back to a housing situation that stopped working. Then travel. You cannot simply board a parrot at the average kennel. You need a bird-experienced sitter or a specialist boarding facility, both of which are less common and more expensive than their dog and cat equivalents, and many owners simply travel less. That's not a line item on a spreadsheet, but it is a real cost of the life you're choosing. And then the cost that no other pet in this series has, and the one we started with, your estate. Because at 50 to 80 years, the arithmetic is unavoidable. If you acquire a young macaw at 40, it may well outlive you. If you acquire an African gray at 30, it will likely still be alive when you are 80. So a genuinely responsible parrot owner has to answer, in advance, a question dog owners never face. Who takes this animal when I'm gone, and how is that funded? And this isn't an abstract thought experiment, it's paperwork. Doing it properly means naming a specific person who has actually agreed, out loud, in advance, to take this particular bird, because my family will sort it out, is how parrots end up in sanctuaries. It means naming a backup, because you are planning across 50 years and your first choice may not outlive you either. It means writing the bird into your will explicitly rather than leaving it as an afterthought, since in legal terms, a parrot is property and will otherwise be handled like furniture. And it means funding it, because handing someone a 50-year-old macaw without also handing them the money to care for it is handing them a bill, not a gift. That's what a pet trust is for, and it is one of the few situations in ordinary life where setting one up is genuinely standard advice rather than an eccentricity. It also means writing down what the next person needs to know, what the bird eats, what it's afraid of, what its words mean, which member of the household it bonded to. 50 years of accumulated detail that exists nowhere but in your head, and that the animal's quality of life depends on. This is why pet trusts and specific bequests for parrots are a real and recommended part of estate planning for large bird owners, and why parrot sanctuaries exist in the numbers they do. Sanctuaries and rescues are consistently overwhelmed, and a striking share of large parrots pass through multiple homes over their lifetime. Each of those transitions is disruptive for an intensely social, intelligent animal that bonds deeply. And rehoming is genuinely traumatic for many parrots, which is often exactly when the screaming and plucking begin or worsen. Sit with what that means, because it's the parrot version of the thesis this whole series keeps landing on. The most common way a parrot's life goes wrong isn't cruelty. It's a 50-year commitment entered into by someone who was honestly imagining 10. And this is where the two very different versions of parrot ownership reveal themselves, because that $100,000 figure describes one specific choice, and there is another one entirely. In the genuinely optimistic scenario, you don't buy a macaw, you You get a budgie or a cockatiel. And this deserves saying clearly, because this video is not an argument against pet birds. A cockatiel is a delightful, affectionate, characterful little parrot. It lives perhaps 15 to 25 years, not 50. It needs a cage measured in hundreds of dollars, not thousands. Its food and toy costs are a fraction of a macaw's. Its voice will annoy you occasionally but will not violate a noise ordinance. Across its whole life, you might spend somewhere in the range of $6,000 to $15,000, and you get a real, genuine, talking and whistling companion relationship out of it. For the overwhelming majority of people who want a parrot, this is the correct answer, and the fact that it rarely gets recommended is one of the quiet failures of how these animals are sold. In the realistic large parrot scenario, ordinary things go wrong. You get the macaw or the cockatoo because they're spectacular and you fell in love. Life changes, the way life does. A job gets busier, a relationship starts or ends. You move. The bird, an intensely social animal that has bonded to you specifically, responds to the disruption exactly the way its biology dictates, by screaming more and, eventually, by plucking. You spend thousands on a medical workup that finds nothing physically wrong. You hire a consultant, you do your genuine best, and somewhere in there, you confront the reality that the animal needs more hours than your actual life contains. That bird's lifetime cost sails well past $150,000 across its decades, and there is a meaningful chance that at some point, it isn't with you for all of them. So let's run the cold financial version, the way a finance channel would. What's the return? You spent $100,000 and up. Resale value, and here parrots are genuinely unusual, because unlike a dog or a horse, a healthy parrot does retain real market value, sometimes thousands of dollars. But selling a bonded parrot is not a financial transaction. It is severing the primary social bond of a highly intelligent animal. And everyone who has done it will tell you it does not feel like closing a position. Income, zero, unless you're breeding, which is a specialized business with its own serious ethical weight. Appreciation, effectively negative once you account for decades of costs. Utility, none. It cannot guard your house, herd anything, or be productive in any sense. And uniquely among everything we've covered, this asset can outlive you and become an obligation in your estate. Run that spreadsheet, and a large parrot is arguably the least defensible purchase in this entire series. It costs more than a car, lasts longer than most marriages, requires a legal plan for your own death, and its single largest input, your time, cannot be bought at any price. And here's the thing, people do it anyway, and the ones who do it well are among the most devoted animal keepers on the planet. Because what the spreadsheet cannot price is that a parrot is, genuinely, a mind. Not a metaphor, not a projection. Large parrots demonstrate real problem solving. They use human words in context. They form deep and specific social bonds. They show behavior consistent with grief. And they can recognize and remember individual people for decades. And we know that with unusual confidence, because of one particular bird. In 1977, a scientist named Irene Pepperberg bought an African gray parrot from a pet store, chosen essentially at random so nobody could claim she'd picked a special bird. She named him Alex, and she worked with him for 30 years. What Alex did rewrote what science was willing to say about bird intelligence. He learned to identify colors, shapes, and materials. He could look at a tray of assorted objects and answer which one was green and three-cornered. He grasped categories, and same and different, and he appeared to understand the concept of zero, which is genuinely difficult and which very few non-human animals have demonstrated. He asked questions about himself. He was not reciting sounds. He was, by the careful standards of the researcher who spent 3 decades testing him, using language to reason. Alex died in 2007, at 31, which for an African gray is young. His body was found in the morning. The night before, going through their normal end-of-day routine, he had said what he said to Pepperberg every night when she left. "You be good. I love you. See you tomorrow." Now, a careful scientist will tell you not to overread that, and Pepperberg herself has always been rigorous about what her data does and doesn't prove. But hold the whole thing together for a second. 30 years, a bird from a random pet store. Concepts, categories, questions, and a nightly goodbye. That is what you are actually bringing home. This is an animal that will learn your voice and call for you by name from another room, that will notice when you are upset, that will spend 50 years choosing your shoulder over every other perch in the world. You didn't buy a pet, you entered a decades-long relationship with a wild, brilliant, emotionally complicated being who is not obligated to like you and decided to anyway, and who will remember you for its entire life. None of that appears in a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet only sees $100,000 going out over half a century. It cannot see the thing that made someone sign up for 50 years of it. So here's the real answer to the economics of owning a parrot. If you want the big ones, the macaws and the grays and the cockatoos, the honest number is 6 figures. The honest time commitment is measured in decades, and the honest first step is not a cage, it's a conversation about your will and about who loves this animal after you. If that sentence made you hesitate, get a cockatiel and get a wonderful one, and be genuinely happy. But if you read all of that and you still want it, if you're prepared for the mess and the noise and the 50-year calendar and the shredded window frames, then you already understand what you're buying, and it was never an investment. Every penny of it was only ever buying one thing: a friend for life. Except with a parrot, that phrase means something no other pet in this series can claim, because for life might not mean its life. It might mean yours. And that, extraordinary as it sounds, is still the best money you will ever spend.